Hello, my name is Kenny Davila, and in this video I will show you how to use the annotation tool to annotate the data on a bar chart. The first step is to click on Edit Data. Remember to do this step only after you have properly annotated the class, the text, the legend, and the axis of a chart. After all of these are properly annotated, only then you can start annotating the chart data. By default, the tool will use the information from the previous step to infer the number of bars. Here, you will be able to correct anything that was incorrectly inferred, and then you will be able to annotate the data, which is, in this case, the height or the width of the bar, depending whether this is a vertical or a horizontal bar chart. In this case, this chart is vertical, so we want to properly mark the height of the bars. We will start with the number of bars. We click on this button. Always make sure to adjust the sum to make sure that you make your job easier. In this case, the first thing is the number of categories, which corresponds to the x-axis. Here we have 4 entries, which correspond to the tick labels. And for data series, we have 2 entries, which correspond to the legend entries. In total, we compute the number of bars based on the number of categories by the number of data series. So we have 4 by 2 equals to 8. If for any reason the number of bars don't match, then you will have to make adjustments. Whether is an error on the inference of the categories and you need to add new categories or remove one of the existing, or data series that are incorrectly inferred because there is no legend or the legend is incomplete, then you will have to add or remove entries. Notice that this tool can only support charts which follow a regular pattern, a regular layout. If for some reason some of these bars are omitted because the value is 0, then the tool cannot represent them. Now the tool can represent cases where the value is 0 as long as the corresponding space is left untouched, which means that there is no bar but the space is there. I'm talking about cases where there are issues because the layout is no longer regular. For example, here we have 8 bars grouped in pairs. If this bar here has a value of 0 and it still displays the same horizontal distance, then we can annotate it. But if for whatever reason the bar is totally omitted, that means that instead of being in this position, this element is moved to the center of the group, then we can no longer handle it with the tool. We need to make sure that the distance between the groups of bars is identical, and the distance between the inner space of the bars is also identical. If it doesn't follow these patterns, then we cannot handle this with this tool at the moment. Now that we have made sure that we have a regular layout, then we can safely assume that this chart can be fully annotated using this tool. The number of bars is indeed correct, so we click on return and we continue. The next step is to check the order and stacking of the bars. This is mostly used for stacked bars. Data series can be sorted in different ways. They don't necessarily follow the order of the legend. So in using these options, you can make sure that you will correctly infer the order. In this case, the first legend entry, LSA, corresponds to the white and the second one corresponds to the black. That is also the visual order of the bars from left to right. So if this is correct, then we can proceed. In other cases, it might be that the order of the legend is not exactly the same visual order. You always should follow the visual orders and make adjustments as required. In this case, we will select the element and use the move up or move down options to change them. Notice that when we move something up or down, they will take different orders or stackings. By default, each corresponding data series is put in a stack of its own, which is exactly as we have it in this chart. For stack bars, you might have some of them to be put in a single stack. So if this was a stack bar, we can use the move up to put them on the same stack. If we want to split them again, we just click on the corresponding move down, and now they become again separate stacks. Since this is the right order, then we can click on accept. The next element to fix is the grouping of the bars. Bars in a chart can be grouped in two ways. They can be grouped by the categories, or they can be grouped by the data series. This will change the way in which the bars appear. So in this case, we have 4 categories and 2 data series. By default, most charts are grouped by category, which means that we will have 4 groups, 1 per category, of 2 bars, because there are 2 data series. In some exceptions, the groupings could be done by data series. So you can check here that it will be the opposite case, where we will have 2 groups, 1 per data series, of bars of the same 4 categories. So we get 2 groups of 4 instead of 4 groups of 2. Make sure to select the proper grouping. In this case, it's per category. Also, notice that if the chart is grouped by data series, it's very likely that you will have to correct the categories in the previous menu. Since this is the proper grouping, now we can continue with the next step. The next step is to edit the bar parameters. Again, this tool assumes that the bar follows a standard layout, which means that we can set the position of the bar by just adjusting 4 parameters. The first one is the offset, which represents the distance between the left axis, in this case because it's a vertical chart, or the top axis, depending on what's the case, and the first bar. The second is the width of the bar itself. The third one is the inner distance, which represents the distance between bars within each group. And finally, the outer distance, which is the distance between the last bar of a group and the first bar of the next one. This is one of the most time-consuming parts of the annotation of bar charts, because it's kinda hard sometimes to get it properly aligned. So you must make sure to set the proper zoom level before you start adjusting this. We will start by setting the offset. As you can see, this one is a bit to the left, so we can move it a bit, move it once again. If we move it once more, it looks like it's a bit too much, so maybe we will use the precision buttons to adjust it to an intermediate point. Then we will adjust the width. As you can see, this to this position is too much, so we will make the bars smaller until they look right. Now the inner distance, so to make sure that the first and the second bar appears in the correct position. So by default it's assumed to be 0, and that's gonna be the case for many charts, but in this case we need to adjust it. So we move it until it has the proper position. And then the last parameter is the outer distance, which corresponds to the distance between the last part of each group and the first one of the next one. So we will reduce it in this case, and then we will check. If we did align it well, then we are finished. But in this case, you can see that there is some significant difference between the actual bar positions and the overlay. So we need to make some adjustments. Maybe I will make the offset a bit smaller, and I will increase the width of the bar, and then I will reduce the inner, and then I will reduce a bit the outer. All of that until I roughly align the bars to the overlay. It is gonna be hard to get them perfectly aligned, but you must make your best effort to try to get them properly aligned always. After some adjustment, they start to seem about right. There could be more than one combination of parameters that give you an adequate distance, so I need to play a bit until you get something that looks accurate enough, like this alignment. They are not perfect, but they are aligned with the beginning and ending, and the difference is small. So once that we are satisfied, we click on accept. The final step of the annotation is the height, in other words the data. So we click on edit bar data, and here we will be able to annotate the height of the bars. Notice that this tool supports a stack bar, because here we have single stack, then there is only one layer, and this layer covers the two data series that we have. We just click on manual bar adjustment, and then we need to click on the corresponding height of each bar. We click here, 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 and roughly here. Always make sure to use zoom so you have the height as approximately correct as possible. Once that you are done, click on accept. If we were doing a stack bar chart, then we need to start with the layer 1, which corresponds to the bottom bars. Then we adjust the height for those bars, and then we move to the next layer to adjust the next layer of bars until we are done. In this case, it's a single layer, and the overlay looks roughly aligned with the corresponding bar. We can always double check, and if it looks correct, then we are ready, and we can just click on return and then accept, and finally remember to save.